2009, Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison, along with their 6-year-old daughter, suddenly left their home in Eufaula, leaving their car in the mountains and disappearing without a trace. 4 years later, in November 2013, their remains were found, but it did not help establish the cause of death or the circumstances of their disappearance. To this day, the mysterious case of the Jamisons remains unsolved. Although Bobby and Sherilyn had their peculiarities, they were generally an unremarkable couple who preferred to keep to themselves. They met in the summer of 2002, quickly fell in love, and got married after about a year and a half. In 2004, Sherilyn gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Madison. The family settled in Eufaula, Oklahoma. Initially, Sherilyn's son from a previous marriage, Colton, also lived with them, but shortly before their disappearance, they sent him to live with his biological father. The Jamison family's life was not easy. Sherilyn had been struggling with depression ever since her sister died in a tragic accident. She was stung by a bee on her tongue. In addition, Sherilyn was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but she regularly received treatment, and it did not significantly affect her life. Bobby also had his own problems. After a car accident, he suffered from chronic back pain that could not be cured. The combination of injuries and financial worries took its toll, and Bobby also fell into despair. It seems that their mental health issues began to affect their marriage. Although they still loved each other, they started to argue more often and even discussed the possibility of divorce. Additionally, the Jamison family had difficult relationships with their neighbors, and some believed that Sherilyn was involved in the occult. Given that the town was small, everyone knew that she and her best friend, Nikki Chenault, had ordered several books about witches, including the Witch's Bible. When 3 of her cats died, presumably due to poisoning, people started to avoid her. Perhaps feeling the need for a fresh start and wanting to save their marriage, the Jamisons began considering moving to a remote location. On October 7, 2009, Bobby, Sherilyn, and 6-year-old Madison got into their SUV and set off to explore other properties. It appears that by midday, they became lost in the rural countryside and even stopped to ask a man for directions. They returned home by evening without reaching their intended destination. The next day, on October 8, they loaded a few belongings into their car and set off into the mountains. From that day on, no one ever saw the Jamison family again, and their SUV was found 8 days later. Why weren't the search efforts initiated sooner? It was because the Jamisons were a fairly private family, and it was not unusual for them to go weeks without contacting friends and relatives. Initially, no one missed them. The few people who stumbled upon their car in the mountains assumed it belonged to gas or oil workers. There was an oil and gas extraction plant nearby. It was only when someone noticed the exhausted dog in the car that people became concerned. When the police arrived at the scene, they found no signs of a struggle. Their clothes, documents, wallets, cell phones, and GPS navigator were all in the car. It seemed that they left the vehicle of their own accord and did not plan to stay outside for long, as they didn't take any warm clothing with them, despite the cool weather in the mountains. Among other things, an 11-page letter written by Sherilyn to her husband was found in the car. It was filled with dissatisfaction and bitterness. In the letter, she referred to Bobby as a loner and a recluse, asked him to reconsider his actions, and stated that she wanted a divorce. Suddenly, this disappearance began to resemble a murder-suicide. Following a more thorough search, another unexpected discovery was made. Under the seat, the police found a bag with $32,000 in cash. Everyone was puzzled. Where did a family facing financial problems come up with such a significant amount of money? From the beginning, the police had 2 theories. The first suggested that due to depression and family problems, Sherilyn convinced her husband and daughter to go to the mountains, where she killed them and then took her own life. It was known that Sherilyn owned a .22 caliber pistol, which she always carried with her, but the police did not find the weapon in the car or their home. The significant amount of money hinted at something illegal. Additionally, their friends noticed that both Bobby and Sherilyn had recently lost weight and looked noticeably worn out, which could indicate substance abuse. However, no evidence was found to support this theory. When the police searched their home, they did not find any traces of drugs. It was unlikely that Bobby and Sherilyn would have left behind no belongings or distinctive signs. In addition, the money remained in the truck. If its disappearance was related to drugs, the killer surely wouldn't have left such a large sum of cash in the car. It can be assumed that the potential killer did not know about the money, but anyone facing death would likely mention it in an attempt to save their own life. Meanwhile, on October 18, 2009, around 300 volunteers set out to search the area, hoping to find any traces of the family. However, they were unsuccessful, and even search dogs couldn't find any evidence. The police tried to track the movements of Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison's cell phone signals. It turned out that after leaving the car, the Jamisons climbed up a nearby rocky hill. For some reason, they stayed there for 15 to 20 minutes before returning to the car. Interestingly, the police discovered a disturbing photo on one of the phones. The photo showed their daughter Madison standing alone at the same hill they climbed. No other photos were taken that day. The girl had her arms crossed and appeared extremely upset, possibly on the verge of tears or fearful. Some speculated that she was just freezing, but others believed it was an unusual photo and couldn't be described definitively. In any case, in the photo, she definitely doesn't resemble a happy child spending a typical day off with her parents. Moreover, this photo significantly complicates the situation. Who took the photo? Why did Madison look so distressed? Why did the parents take her to the mountains on a cold October day without warm clothes? Were her parents with her when the photo was taken? A couple of years before their disappearance, the Jamisons installed surveillance cameras in their home. When the police reviewed the footage, they found interesting details. In the video, Bobby and Sherilyn calmly and methodically load their pickup truck with belongings. Each of them made more than a dozen trips to and from the house, creating a sense that they were in a trance. They didn't stop to talk even once. Another interesting detail was noticed. At some point, Sherilyn placed a brown backpack or briefcase in the car, but when their vehicle was found, it was no longer there. On November 15, 2013, more than 4 years later, their remains were found by hunters. They were located about 5 kilometers from their car in a remote and wooded area between rocks. All three of them lay side by side in natural positions, but face down. The strangest thing was that no signs of violence leading to their deaths were found. Besides the fairly obvious theories of suicide and a failed drug deal, other possibilities were considered paranormal phenomena. The family's pastor revealed that the couple once told him about a dead girl residing in their home. The discovered witch's Bible was considered a dark item in certain circles, and according to specialists, its mindless use can lead to terrifying consequences. That's where the theory came from that they summoned a paranormal force, but it possessed them with tragic consequences. Furthermore, Bobby had a very troubled relationship with his father. To give you an idea, he even had to take his father to court over an inheritance issue. His father had threatened him, but it never escalated beyond that. Nevertheless, this line of investigation didn't lead to anything. Some think they simply got lost in the woods, although those who knew them noted that Bobby was an excellent hunter and loved hiking, making this scenario unlikely. Perhaps they got lost in the woods because they were under the influence of some prohibited substances. But how does this explanation fit with the money? If this was a murder-suicide, how did they die? No weapons were found next to the bodies, although this doesn't rule out the possibility of death by, for example, poison that left no traces. But then why did they go so far from their car? Remember, Bobby had back problems and had difficulty moving even within their home, let alone on an 11-kilometer hike through the mountains and forests. Additionally, if they took their own lives, why were they found lying face down and side by side? The fact that they were found face down could indicate an execution-style murder. The case remains unsolved with too many mysteries and too few answers.